Hey guys, today we are going to be introducing the time period after the Civil War, known as Reconstruction, and the proposed plans for how Reconstruction should be carried out in the United States. So let's first just start with the general definition of what Reconstruction is. So it's basically the time period after the Civil War where the country tries to rebuild or reconstruct itself. If you had to put some years on it, it'd be 1865. That's when the Civil War ended, to 1877, um, which we'll talk about why that date's important later. But basically, the issues that exist after the Civil War are by no means fixed during Reconstruction at all. But these are the two main things that are addressed during the Reconstruction period. Number one is going to be how to readmit the Southern states that rebelled. Like, how do we get them back into the United States? And the word readmit or readmission, really what that means is that a Southern state would be able to participate fully in Congress, so they could send representatives and senators to Congress, as well as to participate in presidential elections. That's what readmission means. The other big issue, the one that definitely is not fully addressed at all during Reconstruction, is how to integrate newly freed people, new Black citizens, how to integrate them into the United States politically, socially, and economically. So as we go through these notes for the rest of the unit, we'll be looking at, okay, like what progress are we making on readmission and what progress are we making on integration of Black citizens? So let's start with the different plans for Reconstruction. So Lincoln in 1863, this is 2 years before the war even ends. Lincoln is already starting to think about how he plans for Reconstruction to go when the war ends. He wants to have a plan ready and carry it out so that he can heal the country quickly. So he calls this plan the 10% plan. Basically, that's because if 10% of voters in a southern state took a U.S. allegiance oath, then and they outlawed slavery in their state, then they would be allowed back into the country and they could participate in Congress and participate in elections. So Lincoln made this public, and it was definitely criticized. One, it was criticized by Congress because Reconstruction plans are essentially laws, and the president can't make laws. That's Congress's job. And there was a specific part of Congress that was really frustrated with this plan. They were called the Radical Republicans. This is a part of Lincoln's party, but they are pretty intense. They're the radical ones. They were led by a guy named Thaddeus Stevens. He is over here. And they really wanted the South to be punished. They wanted the Confederate leaders to be put on trial, maybe even executed, which definitely wasn't part of Lincoln's plan. Lincoln, again, wanted like a quick reunification, no hard feelings, let's just move forward. And the Radical Republicans were also pretty angry that there was no guarantee for Black voting rights. And Lincoln, again, he said basically that he wanted Black voting rights and he believed in that, but as part of this Reconstruction plan, it just wasn't necessary at that point. He was like, we need to heal the country first, and then we can start talking about rights for Black people. But again, that really pissed off the Radical Republicans, and they proposed their own plan for Reconstruction called the Wade-Davis Bill. But Lincoln vetoed it because he thought it was too harsh. He thought it was going to basically instigate another war because it punished the South too much. Anyway, in the end, this is not the plan that took effect, though, because Lincoln died. He was assassinated. So he wasn't president anymore when Reconstruction started. So the guy who is president when Reconstruction starts in 1865 is Andrew Johnson. So Andrew Johnson comes up with his own plan. It's called the Presidential Plan, also known as the Amnesty Plan. The word amnesty means forgiveness. You can kind of tell it's a pretty lenient, nice plan for the South. And at this point, the 13th Amendment has been written, and he's like, listen, Southern states, all you got to do if you want to come back into the country is just ratify the 13th Amendment. That's it. No pledges of allegiance, no new state governments, no execution or trials for any Confederate leaders. Just ratify the 13th Amendment and you're good to go. This is criticized by Congress, again, because it's, essentially a law, and Congress thinks they should make laws. And it's also criticized by the Radical Republicans because it's seen as not being harsh enough. The Southern states really like it, though, and a lot of these Southern states are like, sweet, and they ratify the 13th Amendment pretty quickly because they're like, if this is all we have to do is just get rid of slavery, like, okay. However, This plan is not the successful plan, though. This is not the one that really takes effect because Johnson gets impeached. And we'll talk about that in a second. A large part of why Johnson gets impeached, and we'll talk about what actually impeachment is in a little bit, but a large part of why he gets impeached is because he and Congress are not getting along at all. Um, Johnson is known for using the veto power a lot, which is not illegal. Johnson can definitely do that. He's president. But Congress was just like, listen, we're trying to get stuff done with Reconstruction. We're trying to move the country forward, and you keep vetoing all these laws that are going to do that. Two examples of that are the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the Freedmen's Bureau Act. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 would have given citizenship to newly freed Black slaves. This is before the 14th Amendment was passed, though. So the 14th Amendment eventually does this. It's just first it was done in a law. And then the Freedmen's Bureau Act would have created, or it did create, the Freedmen's Bureau, which essentially is a government organization to help Blacks and poor whites in the South with getting education, job training, clothing, food, hospitals, reunification of families, all those types of things. Down here, these are pictures of freedmen's schools. So you can definitely see in both images people of all ages, children as well as adults, learning how to read and write because they had never had those skills before, and that they need those things for jobs. So both of these are passed by Congress. They get in front of Johnson, and Johnson vetoes them. Because Johnson basically says, listen, I don't think that it's the job of the federal government to do these things. The southern states will just do it for themselves, which they were not going to do these things for newly freed people at all. You can see Johnson vetoing the Freedmen's Bureau. Sometimes a dresser is called a bureau, and you see these little people like hopping out, they're falling out. But yeah, this is Johnson using the veto for that. Congress, though, we know because of checks and balances, can override a veto, which is what they do. And they make both of these things laws. So the Civil Rights Act and the Freedmen's Bureau Act both become laws because Congress overrides Johnson's vetoes. Congress puts up their own plan for Reconstruction. It's called the Military Reconstruction Act. Again, a lot of people in Congress are radical Republicans. They want the South to be punished, and they also want there to be some type of guarantee that newly freed people are going to have some rights, especially voting rights. So the Military Reconstruction Act of 1867 basically divided these southern states into 5 military districts. Each state, if they wanted to get back into the Union, they had to ratify the 14th Amendment, and they had to pass laws within their state that granted Black suffrage. Now, the reason why this is so harsh is because it's essentially martial law. It's like rule by the military until the southern states did those two things. This is criticized by the former Confederate states because they do think that it's too harsh, and it's also criticized by Johnson, and Johnson vetoes it. However, this is the plan for Reconstruction, though. This is the one that's going to reconstruct the country politically, get those southern states back into the country, because Congress overrode Johnson's veto and it became a law. So now let's get into some of the drama with Johnson's impeachment, because you can definitely see Johnson and Congress are not getting along very well at all. So Congress wants to impeach Johnson. Impeachment is something that's largely misunderstood by the American public. Many people think impeachment means to kick out of office. That's not what impeachment means. Impeachment really just means to formally charge a president or an elected official with a crime. That's it. The reason why Congress wants to impeach Johnson or charge him with a crime is because he's using the veto too much and he's not carrying out the Military Reconstruction Act. However, both of those aren't really crimes, so Congress really needs Johnson to commit a crime, which we'll talk about in a second. Let's just go through really quick the stages of the impeachment process. This was recently in the news with the impeachment of President Trump in early 2020, but again, just to go through these steps one more time. So the first thing is the criminal act. The president has to commit a crime. The Constitution says it has to be a high crime or a felony or a treasonous act. However, it can be any type of crime. Then the House of Representatives investigates the criminal wrongdoing or the claims of wrongdoing, and they vote on whether or not they think the president committed a crime. If 2/3 of the House votes in favor of impeachment, then the president is impeached. Then at that point, though, the president doesn't get kicked out of office yet. There is a Senate trial. Just like if you were accused of a crime by the government, you get a trial. Same thing with the president. They get a trial. The Senate basically acts like a jury. The president has a lawyer. The United States has a lawyer. And in the end, after both sides present their case, the Senate votes. 2/3 of the Senate are needed for a guilty verdict. So here are the different verdicts. You can have guilty if 2/3 vote guilty, then the president is removed from office. That's never happened in American history, ever. You can have acquitted. This is what's happened twice in American history with President Clinton and with President Trump, basically where the Senate doesn't believe there's enough evidence to fully remove the president from office. Or you can have this third option. It's called a censure. It's basically like a slap on the wrist. It says, the president's done something wrong, but nothing really happens. Okay. So here's the crime that happens. The cabinet that Johnson inherited from Lincoln, Johnson doesn't like. And so Johnson wants to get rid of all those cabinet members and establish his own cabinet. Well, Congress doesn't like that he keeps getting rid of Lincoln's cabinet. There's one guy left. His name was Edwin Stanton. He's a Secretary of War. He's the last one that Johnson hasn't fired. And Congress is like, we want to make it illegal for him to fire that guy. So they pass a law called the Tenure of Office Act that makes it illegal for the president to fire a cabinet member. Well, Johnson's like, all right, I'll do it. He knows he's being dared to do this crime. He fires Stanton, and there you go. He's committed a crime. And so the House of Representatives file for impeachment charges. He is impeached, and then it goes to the Senate for a trial. Well, in the Senate trial, the vote was 35-19. He was found not guilty by one vote. Thus, he is acquitted and he is not removed from office. However, this really kills his reputation, and he does not run for re-election in 1868. He does not run again. This impeachment trial was a pretty big sensation. Think of all the firsts that have been happening at this time. The first Civil War, the first presidential assassination, the first impeachment of a president. It was insane. You could buy tickets to go see this impeachment trial. There's a ticket right there. But in the end, he was acquitted and he was not removed from office. But like I said, his reputation was basically ruined. So as we're moving forward throughout the next few objectives, we're going to take a step back and look to see how the next president handles Reconstruction, as well as what's going on with the second focus of Reconstruction, which is the integration of newly freed people into the United States society.